Have you ever wondered if the person sitting right next to you, the one who just promised to spend the rest of their life with you, is actually a complete stranger? We often think of wedding days as the happiest moments of our lives, the culmination of a fairy tale where two souls become one under the soft glow of candlelight and the cheers of loved ones. But what happens when the music stops, the guests go home, and the heavy doors of the bridal suite click shut? For me, that silence was louder than any orchestra. It was a silence that carried the weight of 1,000 secrets I had never dared to speak. Today, I want to tell you my side of the story, not the one captured in the glossy photographs or the one whispered by the relatives in the pews, but the raw, unfiltered truth of what it feels like to be a bride who is mourning a life she hasn't even left yet. You see, the wedding was perfect. Every detail, from the hand-stitched lace on my gown to the vintage champagne, was orchestrated to project an image of absolute bliss. But as I sat on the edge of that bed, still draped in the fabric of a dream I wasn't sure I wanted, I realized that the man sitting beside me was looking for a version of me that didn't exist. Have you ever felt the pressure of a mask so heavy it begins to crack your very soul? That night, the air in the room felt thick, charged with an electricity that wasn't passion, but rather a profound, aching uncertainty. My husband, Julian, sat there in his tuxedo, the sharp lines of his suit contrasting with the soft, warm light of the bedside lamps. He looked like the hero of a movie, but to me, he felt like a question I didn't know how to answer. Why is it that we often wait until the most permanent moments of our lives to realize we might be making the biggest mistake? As I looked out the window at the city skyline, the twinkling lights of 1,000 other lives felt like a mockery of my own isolation. I had spent years trying to be the perfect partner, the supportive anchor, the woman who never complained. But in doing so, I had erased the parts of myself that actually mattered. I had become a silhouette in my own life story. Does anyone truly know their partner, or do we just fall in love with the parts they choose to show us? I remember the way the white petals on the floor looked like fallen stars, beautiful but discarded. Julian reached out his hand, his fingers brushing against mine, and for a moment I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him about the letter I had hidden in my vanity, the one from the person I was before I met him. I wanted to tell him that my heart was a house with too many locked doors, and I had lost the keys a long time ago. But instead, I just looked at him, my eyes reflecting the amber glow of the lamps, and I felt the crushing weight of expectation. Have you ever felt like you were drowning in a room full of air? That is what it feels like to live a lie that everyone else thinks is the truth. We spent the next hour in a delicate dance of avoided eye contact and heavy sighs. Every time he went to speak, I would turn away, terrified that the first word out of his mouth would be the one that broke the spell. I kept thinking about the promises we had made just hours before, to have and to hold, for better or for worse. But what if the worse is the person you've become to keep the better alive? What if the holding feels more like a cage? This is the side of the story that doesn't make it into the wedding albums. It's the side where the bride isn't blushing from excitement, but from the heat of a secret that's burning its way out. I thought back to the morning of the wedding, the way my mother had adjusted my veil with tears in her eyes, telling me how lucky I was. I felt like a fraud. I felt like an actress on a stage where the audience was the world, and the script was written in a language I couldn't speak. Is it possible to love someone and still feel completely alone when they are right there? The city lights outside seemed to pulse with a life I was no longer a part of. I was now part of a we, a us, a them. The I was fading, becoming a ghost in the corner of the room. I wondered if Julian felt it too. I wondered if, behind that stoic, handsome face, he was also wondering who this woman in the lace dress really was. Or was he satisfied with the surface? Was he happy with the image? Some people are content with a beautiful painting, never caring to look at the canvas underneath. But I wasn't a painting. I was a storm, and I was tired of pretending to be a calm sea. As the night stretched on, the silence became a character in the room, a third person sitting between us on the bed. I realized then that love isn't just about the grand gestures or the public vows. It's about the courage to be seen in the dark, without the lace, without the tuxedo, without the expectations of 1,000 people watching. I looked at Julian, and for the first time, I didn't see a husband. I saw another human being who was probably just as terrified as I was, caught in the same trap of perfection we had built together. Could we ever find a way back to the truth, or were we destined to live out this beautifully lit tragedy? I stood up, the heavy train of my dress rustling against the hardwood floor, and I walked to the window. The world was so big, and our room felt so small. I realized that her side of the story wasn't just about pain. It was about the desperate need for authenticity in a world that values appearance above all else. If I spoke now, would it destroy us, or would it finally set us free? Every relationship has a tipping point, a moment where the truth becomes more important than the peace. I felt myself leaning toward that point, the words bubbling up in my throat like a flood. I wanted to tell him everything about the fears, the doubts, the hidden letters, and the woman I used to be. I wanted him to see the cracks, because only through the cracks can the light get in. But as I turned back to him, I saw the way he was looking at me with such a mixture of hope and vulnerability that my heart broke all over again. How do you tell the person you love that you are lost? How do you explain that the wedding was a beginning for him, but felt like an ending for you? This is the quiet struggle of so many, the emotional undercurrent that runs beneath the surface of our most sacred institutions. It's a story of longing, of identity, and of the terrifying beauty of being truly known. As the clock ticked toward midnight, I made a choice. I wouldn't let the silence win. I would start with one word, one honest thought, and see where it led. Because even if the truth ruins the fairy tale, it's the only thing that can build a real life. Have you ever had the courage to tell your side of the story, even when you knew it might change everything? As I sat back down on the bed, I took a deep breath. The city lights were still there, the lamps were still glowing, and the petals were still on the floor. But something had changed. The mask was slipping, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally coming home to myself. This is my side of the story. It isn't perfect, it isn't easy, and it isn't what people expect. But it is mine, and in a world of shadows and lace, that is the only thing that matters. I looked at Julian and I said his name, and in that moment, the real story finally began. It's a story that requires more than just a vow. It requires a constant daily choosing of the truth over the image. It's about finding the strength to say, "This is who I am," and hoping that the person beside you is brave enough to stay. Because at the end of the day, the most emotional stories aren't the ones that end in happily ever after, but the ones that begin with "This is the truth." And that, more than any wedding, is a cause for celebration.